Cell phones have become a critical part of how people stay informed, and in emergencies, they also play a major role in getting key messages across to the public with important information and updates. Police also have access to these mandatory alerting systems, and we've seen them used in a number of emergency situations in Saskatchewan over the last few years, particularly for Amber Alerts and dangerous person alerts. But how can police use those tools as effectively as possible? That's one question Mandy Maier was looking to find out as a graduate student through Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us to talk a little bit more about some of this research you've been involved in. So how can these alerts be used in a way that keeps the public informed without running that risk of people potentially tuning out to constant alerts?
Definitely. So really the core of this research was to figure out what was happening across Canada, because there is so little insight into what police do when it comes to emergency alerting and using the National Public Alerting System. So one thing the public can do that was very evident is, who are your local police and how do they use public alerting when it comes to emergency situations? One of the recommendations was that public education piece. So really encouraging police to say, hey, this is how we use public alerting. Make sure you're aware of it. Make sure you know how it's used. So in that situation, they know how to manage what's happening.
And what makes it so important for police to be mindful of these alerting practices and finding that balance between people at risk of tuning out and not being informed enough and going to other, sometimes less reliable sources of information during some of these critical moments?
A lot of the people that I spoke with in police services talked about that public expectation, and it shapes how police business is really done. Whether that's talking about staff shortages, police capacity comparisons, that expectation is there that information is shared by police as soon as it's received. And that's not necessarily the case. It needs to make sure that it's credible, that there's enough information to actually issue, something like a dangerous persons alert. And they're constantly balancing as police responding to not just one incident, but potentially multiple incidents as well. They have to balance what they're dealing with, and 30 minutes in the lifespan of an incident can be an eternity in a policing context.
And so in addition to this work, you've had some firsthand experience with this as well through your role with the Saskatchewan RCMP. So from where you're looking at and some of the recommendations that you make here, what's it going to take for police agencies to be able to implement some of the changes that you've recommended here in this report?
Definitely. So public education is the first thing that I kind of tapped into there. The police organizations that are out there, they're able to action and implement change. The public should be aware of how police are communicating, but really the police have an onus to say, this is how we're using the public alerting systems. They also need to build trust, so make sure that they are that credible source of information when there is a risk to public safety, that the public is going to those places that they know are tried and true sources of information. And one of the public survey responses was, people want to be communicated via the National Public Alerting System. So those alerts we get on our phone first and foremost. Second is through local media. So do police have those contacts with local media? And the third was police social media. So making sure that it's possible to communicate while all of this is going on as well. That training and practice as well. Police officers are constantly navigating, crisis situations day to day. It's not something that the public hears about all the time. So how are they managing the alerting, training, and practice so that when a critical incident happens and there's that imminent risk to public safety, they're enacting their protocols as quickly as possible? I think across Canada, we have seen significant change. There's been a number of significant incidents. What I learned in my research is that police services across the country have drastically different approaches to public alerting. And I think now is the time for police to come together and, speak with people that manage the National Public Alerting System and say, hey, let us have a voice. Let us be part of these conversations so we can have consistency, have regular processes and training and protocols. So we're ready to serve the public as quickly as possible as police services.
Perfect. And that's about the time we have. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us. There's been a good look into how some of these systems work behind the scenes.